best man. Two quick things before I get started. One, I had a bunch of great one-liners planned at Paul's expense, but about a few months ago, he said to me, he's like, dude, if you make fun of me, just always remember that I'm your best man, and I'll ultimately have the last laugh. So I knew not to pick that battle with Paul. And number two, a few weeks ago, Kate and I, my fiance, grabbed dinner with Paul and Deirdre. And Deirdre tried to put the fear of God in me to say, hey, I've been talking to my wedding planner. We have a very strict schedule. Your speech is to be no longer than 2 minutes. And so, I put on an agreeable face. I'm like, okay, that's not a lot of time. But Deirdre, it's your wedding. Okay, 2 minutes, you got it. But Deirdre, I'm here to tell you that I lied. I've been friends with Paul now for over 20 years, and to try to sum that all up in 2 minutes or less, it ain't happening. But I do promise that I'll try to be quick. So Paul, I could go on for days about you and I, and about our relationship and how much it's meant to me over the years, but to put it as succinctly as possible, I honestly consider you more like a brother to me than just a friend. And one story that I think of between Paul and I is, my sophomore year in high school, him and I are about to play in the state championship, and I'm kind of just like a nervous guy by nature, as evidenced by my half-eaten salad right there. And so we're about to play in the biggest game of our lives in front of a few thousand people, and I remember just grabbing Paul and I'm like, let's go hang out someplace else. And him and I went off onto this, this kind of lounge area in Haverford's gym, and we were sitting on the couches, and we were talking about anything but lacrosse, and we were joking and laughing, and I just remember getting this almost this calming feeling over myself, and I was comforted by the fact that I said to myself, I got Paul by my side, everything's gonna be all right. Sure enough, everything was all right. We won the state championship. I had a goal and 3 assists, but that's the way Paul and I have always been. I've always said to myself, I got Paul by my side, everything's going to be all right. And I'll touch back on this in a little bit. So I would be remiss if I didn't say a few words about Mr. and Mrs. Barnes. You don't get 2 amazing children like Marin and Paul by accident. It's largely in part due to you guys. And from the bottom of my heart, I just thank you guys so much for being so nice to me over the years and always welcome me into your home with open arms. And I honestly consider you guys like a second set of parents to me. So just thank you so much. And Mr. and Mrs. Moran, I don't know you two as well, but it's got to be much the same because Deirdre is just the absolute best. And so, yes, I was there the first night that Paul and Deirdre met each other. And, Marin's got this long-running joke where, she says to Paul and I, I really don't even understand why you two even go out. Like, you two just end up talking to each other the entire night. Marin's very smart. She went to Cornell for a reason. She's spot on. And so about 5 years ago, Paul and I went to Bull's Head Tavern, New York, the weekend of New Year's. Yep. And it was much like how Marin describes. It was just Paul and I talking to each other, not really socially interacting with anyone else. And at one point, I said to Paul, all right, I'm going to run to the bar. I'll be right back. And when I turned around and I came back, I see Paul talking to this girl from the distance. And I was like, oh, great. I'm like, now I'm gonna have to go play damage control. Like my big clumsy friend Paul definitely just stepped on this poor girl's foot or spilled a drink on her or something bad. It's time to go diffuse the situation. But as I got closer, I could see that things were actually pretty cordial. And I'm like, wow, this is really shocking. And so I tapped Paul on the shoulder and I'm like, yo, what's up, dude? I'm back. And he turns around and honestly just gives me this death stare. And I'm thinking maybe he's confused. I'm like, Paul, it's me, John, your best friend. What's up? And still, just a death stare. And what I quickly realized is that Paul did not want me interrupting and potentially ruining his chances with this girl. And so I felt like how maybe my dad must have felt, dropping me off my first middle school dance. I love you, Dad, but get away, you're embarrassing me in front of my friends. So I don't even think I even shook Deirdre's hand. But, so if you were to ask me at the time, did you know that this was going to be the girl that Paul was going to fall in love with and marry, No, I didn't, but it's hard to even know that when you don't even know the girl's name. But I would say I did know it was something special, because I've never seen my best friend act like that before. And so, I'm just so unbelievably happy you guys found each other. And when I think of ways to try to describe Deirdre, I always think back to a phrase that our high school lacrosse coach used to say, and it was, sports are a microcosm of life, meaning that the lessons you learn on the playing field and the way you conduct yourself, that carries over into real life. And I've always been a firm believer in that, and I've always held that true to my heart. And so I've had the pleasure of playing golf with Deirdre on many occasions. And she's had the displeasure of playing with me because I'm not even half as good as she is. But from spending that time with her on the course, I've learned a lot about her as a person, and I've come to learn, she's definitely competitive, she's definitely confident, but above all else, she is just a really sweet and sincere girl. And a few months ago, I was traveling back on a plane from a business trip, and I stumbled upon an article, and I was flipping through a magazine about Steph Curry, the basketball player. And the whole point of the article is to talk about how such a great guy he is. And at the last paragraph of the article, the owner of the Warriors said, the best compliment I could pay to Steph is that he's the type of guy that you would want your daughter to marry. And honest to God, I sat back in my plane seat and I just said to myself, I'm like, Deirdre's the type of girl that I would want my best friend to marry. Happier than I've ever seen him before. And if life ever gets tough, if it ever gets hard, just think back to how I felt before our state championship. But now you two have each other by your side, and everything will be all right. I love you guys. I wish you the best. Cheers.